This will be a short video explaining how to do some of the exercises for 6.2 Aplia. So 6.2, like in 6.1, is going to task me with proving some arguments. And 6.2 is a little bit tougher because in addition to the 4 rules that we got in 6.1, they're now going to add 4 additional rules: the constructive dilemma rule, simplification, addition, and the conjunction rule. And I can always check in my assignment here for all of the rules that are in play. In this case, I've got these 8 now, but I'm going to potentially need to use to solve an argument or to prove an argument. So when I look at an argument like this, one thing I might try to do is just see if I can apply a rule and if that's going to work for me. But as we add more rules, it's going to become more and more important that I approach each proof with a kind of strategy by looking at the conclusion of the argument that I'm trying to prove and seeing if that either forces a particular rule to come into play or at least gives me some idea about how I need to approach things. So when I look at this argument, I note that the conclusion is a disjunction. And in 6.2, I learned that really the only 2 ways I have available to me at this point to create a disjunction that isn't already in my argument, and I note that there isn't this particular disjunction already up here someplace, is to use either addition. If I get one part of the disjunction, namely if I got not D, well then I could just add the or C part with addition, or to use constructive dilemma, which is going to use a conjunction of 2 conditionals. And if I have the disjunction of their antecedents, well then I can spit out the disjunction of their consequence. So here I'm noting that I've got both of these pieces in here already. I've got not D, I've got not, or excuse me, C, I've got them in a bunch of places. So I'm thinking that where I'm going to end up going here is constructive dilemma. So I'm going to need to combine a couple single conditionals using a conjunction and see what happens from there. So when I look at this now, though, I don't really have a simple conditional. I've got these messes. Luckily, I note here in 3, I'm going to be able to get to this second conditional here pretty easily. So I'm going to do that first and then see what happens from there. So for line 4 from line 1 and line 3, I'm going to use modus ponens to get just this part of the conditional, or the overall conditional here. So what I'm going to get is if C is true, then it follows that D is false. Okay, check that. All right. So I now have this. And this has a part of what I want if I'm going to use constructive dilemma at some point, which is a not D as its consequent. All right, so that's useful to me. What I now need, if I'm going to use constructive dilemma, is another conditional that has C as its consequent. And luckily, I'm going to get that pretty quickly now. If I note here, this if C then not D is just the antecedent of this particular conditional for 2. So now I'm going to do 2 for modus ponens, all right, and I'm going to get if not L, then C. So not L, ooh, that's not what I wanted to do. Cancel. If not L, then C. Okay, let's check this. All right. All right, this is good. I now have 2 conditionals where I've got as their consequence the things that I want, and I also note up here, hey, I've got the disjunction of their antecedents, so all I really need to do now is put them together with conjunction rule. So I'm going to do if C, and I want to make sure that I get them in the right order for what I want to do. So I want to have the C part on the left and the not L part on the right, because that's how it's set up for this disjunction, and that's also going to give me the not D part on the left and the C part on the right for this disjunction when I use the rule. Okay, so there's C, then not D. That's one side of this, and not L, then C. Okay. And I did this by taking lines 4 and 5 and just using my new rule conjunction to put them together. And I'm doing this because I want to eventually run constructive dilemma, and constructive dilemma needs the 2 conditionals linked together as a conjunction. All right. Now once I have this, I note I've got the disjunction of their antecedents. Right, here's the C part, here's the not L part. So what I can add at line 7 is the conclusion that I was looking for, which is not D or C. And that came from 1 and 6 using disjunctive syllogism, or not disjunctive syllogism, constructive dilemma. Because this rule says if I have the conjunction of two conditionals and I have a disjunction of their antecedents, which I do, then I can conclude or add the disjunction of their consequence, which is what I had here. That's exactly the conclusion of the argument. I check it, check proof, done. Okay, one thing to note, and this is why some of these are much more difficult than in the past, is that this argument right here, I could have tried to do in other ways that would not have worked too well for me. Right, so one thing I might have tried to do, because I see it, is to run a hypothetical syllogism, right? Because I've got here C or not L forces if C then not D. So I could go from C or not L to if not L then C, right? So I could make a new conditional if I wanted to using hypothetical syllogism. I would do C or not L, close that baby off, add this, and then I'm getting if not L, then C. Where you at? There we go. Okay, and that would have come from 2-3 hypothetical syllogism. And I'm thinking, yeah, it did a rule, it's correct, boom. But note now that this is actually not going to help me. If I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to do this and then try to eventually do my, what you have it, constructive dilemma. I mean, okay, maybe I'll take that back. This would be useful to me, but I've got to recognize one other thing now. I now want to take this, note that I have the antecedent so I could spit out if not L then C, and I would go from there. I would still need to get this part, right? So this would be kind of a roundabout way of getting to if not L then C, one part of the conditionals that I ultimately needed. But note that this on its own, not terribly useful. What would be useful at this point is to take 1 and 8, do modus ponens, and spit out part of the conditional that I eventually want to use or just constructive dilemma on. So this is something that could be done. This is an alternate route using hypothetical syllogism. I'd have not L then C. I would have done the same thing up here to get C or not D with 1 and 3. And then I could have done the same thing I did earlier, which is combine these two things and then run discharge constructive dilemma. So note now, there are multiple paths to take. Sometimes they're both going to work, and sometimes they're not both going to work. So be aware of that when you're running these proofs. And pretty much every other proof you're going to look at is going to work similar to this. You're going to make some sort of strategy based on what you see in the conclusion, and then work your way through using all 8 rules that are available to you.